Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's installment of Washington Post Story Mode, the show where we discuss the biggest video game news of the week every week. I'm Washington Post video game reporter Nathan Grayson, and today we are talking about Twitch streamers covering Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In order to do that, I am joined by a guest, Lance from the Serfs.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to apologize in advance for my terrible voice. I'm just on the tail end of recovering from COVID, but I'm doing much better. So it's a pleasure.
Now, I've heard that COVID is, and I quote, bad.
It's not great. That's how I put it. But I would definitely recommend everyone get vaccinated because my experience was only a couple of days, and I didn't need to go to a hospital or get Dr. Joe Rogan to get me the kitchen sink or some ivermectin or that horse strip that everyone's talking so much about. I didn't really need any external things outside of a healthy dose of Dayquil and Nyquil in moderation or in excess.
Yeah, whichever works for you. But yeah, I mean that is very good to hear. And yeah, I mean, the stuff clearly works. There are statistics that back up the fact that people who are vaccinated suffer from symptoms that are not as bad, and I think maybe more importantly, don't die. At
Yeah,
least they do not die with a great frequency.
yeah, it's true.
Um, but yeah, so like I obviously brought you on today to talk about kind of what it's been like as somebody who streams on Twitch to kind of, cover and address the events unfolding in Ukraine, which are obviously, very terrible and tragic and, you know, unnecessary. And so, yeah, I just wanted to sort of talk to you about your approach to doing that and like kind of how you view yourself in the grander scheme of media that is, kind of all focused on this right now. So I guess to kind of begin, like in terms of, when you cover these topics on stream, what are sort of your goals of your coverage? Like, are you trying to give a kind of well-rounded view of what's going on? Or do you have more specific goals around, like, for example, countering mainstream narratives, countering misinformation? Does it vary like broadcast to broadcast? Kind of how do you approach it?
Well, I would say that I have pretty extreme delusions of grandeur, and so that I've come to terms with that. I am now pretty much the only source one should trust, and so hopefully everyone who's watching me. No, I mean the only reason I want to make the only reason I want to make a joke about that is that it seems like it's pretty surreal in the modern age that a whole bunch of people who like 2 weeks ago I was talking pretty consistently about truckers in Canada and the far right radicalization aspects of that and then reacting to silly videos. And then all of a
Mhm.
sudden, and I'm not alone in this. And then every single person who is doing that next week is expected to become Walter Cronkite. Like the stakes might be that high.
Mhm.
Personally, for me, in terms of how I've approached it, is that I've been trying to humble myself on a regular basis because streamers at the end of the day, people are watching you, I think, to be able to get the newest version of information. And
Mhm.
it seems like every single time something cataclysmic is occurring, there is a online mass panic that also goes along with it. I could point towards the events that happened at the nuclear power plant last week, and I was getting a lot of people immediately posting me links and things and talking about how we are on the verge of a full-on 10 times worse than Fukushima event and this is that. And one of the first things I had noticed when that was happening was that it didn't seem at all that the reactor itself had been struck. Not that I'm trying to downplay the severity of what was going on. It
Mhm.
was an absolutely horrifying moment in history and one that should be avoided at all costs. But I noticed that a lot of people were already talking about this as if the nuclear reactor itself was on fire, or they had somehow penetrated through the layers and layers of concrete that protects that barrier. And very few people online were trying to push the message that was this is an administrative building that's on fire near it. This is not a good situation, but this is certainly not. We are on the verge of kind of like a nuclear meltdown, and that was uh I guess a very big moment that I think a lot of streamers who are covering it at the same time
Mhm.
kind of have to recognize that, like, if you give way to I suppose the online panic in real time, as a lot of people tend to do because these events are so scary and they're happening so quickly, then you're most likely going to make the situation infinitely worse.
Mhm.
So when I say it's been humbling to say the very least, I've been trying to come out as often as possible and be like, You know, I've gotten a lot of things wrong on this. It's probably my time to learn when it comes to a lot of these topics, and I'll usually watch a lot of content in legacy media. And also like, you know, documentaries that I trust to try and learn more about it rather than just do the typical like, you know, react Andy. I see an
Hmm.
event and tell you, okay, no, here's what happened and here's what's going to happen next, kind of thing. Because like, I think anyone who tells you on a regular basis they know what's going to happen next has no clue.
Right, right, of
Right.
course. Well, yeah, and so like with that in mind, how do you sort of approach like balancing those things? Because you were talking about, people coming to streams to get like the latest version of information. But when you're doing that, like, I can't imagine that it's easy to vet the information you get. You can do other forms of vetting. Like, for example, you were saying you can watch other sources, you can like, get better context. But like when something brand new like arrives on your doorstep, how do you say like, okay, this is worth surfacing versus like, oh, maybe this is a little bit, dodgier?
Usually before I'd make an affirmative statement as in X is happening, I'd want it to be verified in some form or another by legacy media, right?
Hmm.
Like before I'd say like, okay, this is now taking place. I'd want to see like you know, it being reported somewhere, whether that's, you know, BBC or Al Jazeera, it doesn't matter. And at which
Hmm.
point I can be like, okay, so now we can start to approach it from that standpoint, and also to try and avoid people inundating you with just Twitter links, because there is obviously Twitter links that can be verified Twitter links, but even, you know, no one is above this. Everyone is getting things wrong in a regular basis. You have to kind of be a online vetting machine, and then combine that with the fact that there is a surplus of trolls right now popping up in streamers chat on a regular basis with just the most hyperbolic statements. You know, like
Mhm.
some people have said that people have popped in their chats straight up being like, you know, Russia has launched nukes, and then like, you know, with all exclamation points, and then just like spamming that for a while, or things to that effect. And then obviously, you know, for whatever reason, they're trying to get a reaction out of everyone, or yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, when you have that going on, like when there are people saying all of this ridiculous stuff in your chat and everything, like what do you even like again, how do you like avoid doing the whole how do you keep a straight face at that point? Especially when it's like something where you're like, okay, this could be true. I need to vet it, but also like, it could be not true and it could just be ridiculous. Like, how do you sort of like because at the same time you're also having to like, entertain people, talk to people, like continue your stream. Like how do you balance all or juggle all of these different things?
Well, I should start by saying I'm not a gold standard for any of this. I mean, like
Mhm.
everyone else, I've made so many mistakes. I was one of the people pushing really hard against the fact that I even thought this was going to take place when it was first starting out, just because of, I guess, my hesitancy to trust, you know, state intel and stuff like that from coming out of the U.S. So I think one of the bigger things would probably be recognizing a lot of the shortcomings that you have just as a React streamer. I mean, I have to stress this a lot. None of us are like have doctorates in geopolitics, you know. And like I said a couple of weeks ago, I was laughing in real time at Tim Pool getting everything wrong about the Canadian trucker rally, and then it goes
Mhm.
from that to something where the stakes are so very high, especially in the way people react to it. Um, I think for me, obviously, before going forward with like, I can go back to that nuclear power plant event that took place. Before it was being reported wildly in legacy media, there was obviously a lot of Twitter accounts that were sounding the alarm bells, saying this was really, really bad. And then I noticed a lot of streamers weren't, and this is credit to them, weren't going as far as saying like this event is taking place like in real time. They were waiting to see what other sources said. So, I mean, for all the excuse me, my throat, but for all
Mhm.
the shitting that people do on legacy media, sorry.
No, no, don't. Okay, what? You keep talking. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, for all the shitting people do in legacy media, on a repeated basis, like, you know, the mainstream media is all fake news and stuff like that. I think streamers should also recognize that, like, we're all editorial pieces, every
Mhm.
single one of us, right? We're not journalists. We're entertainers on the internet. That's what we do. You know, like half the time, you know, when we're not reporting on this kind of stuff, we're making you know, poop and pee jokes and stuff like that. So, if it were not for the work of actual real journalists who cover this kind of stuff, and
Mhm.
even you know, the bravest of the brave, the ones who are like on the ground floor, and
Mhm.
going to the locations, streamers would be nothing but just you're looking at one individual's ability to editorialize in real time. That's really what it comes down to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, like, when you sort of address this, because this is kind of a thing where I think there's a really hard balance to strike, right? Because I think that on some level you want to present yourself as authoritative, because then people will come to your stream for information in these times. And like, you know, if you start your stream by saying like, "Hey everybody, ignore me," then people are probably not going to watch you. But at the same time, you still need to convey like, "Hey, I'm just a person. Like there are other authorities out there, or there are other sources that might have like info that is, you know, more concrete than what I can present." And so how do you couch that when you're addressing audiences about this? How do you sort of walk that line such that people understand where you're coming from, and like the sort of, you know, again, position that you occupy amongst all of these other media sources they could be drawing on?
I would say just on a repeated basis to acknowledge what exactly you are.
Hmm.
And in my case, you know, I'm an entertainer on the internet. I hope people walk away from my streams, not just entertained, but obviously educated on a topic, right? So I do think there's a responsibility to do due diligence and that kind of stuff when you're talking about these kind of things. But you know, I don't have any delusions of grandeur about this. I think transparency would be the big thing.
Hmm.
Just be completely clear out of the gates that like, again, what you're witnessing if you watch me live covering this event is you're watching someone editorializing based on their own biases and opinions as quickly as possible in real time.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, speaking of, in chat, Imp Grievous just asked, "I've heard streamers talk about chat as helping to validate information, and also chat as a vector for misinformation. How do you balance that?"
I think anyone who's got a large, like a large viewer base knows
Mhm.
that they're probably gonna have a lot of people whom they recognize in terms of like names and trust. So there are certain people who, you know, when they send in a link, if it's someone I've never seen before in the chat, obviously I'm going to be a little bit more dubious about whether I should even like put it up on screen first before like
Mhm.
vetting it. But I usually try to tell them the same thing that I hope they expect from me, which is that like, um, verify your sources. If it's, you know, uh, Ukraine for 20 big chungus at whatever on Twitter, and they've made some huge statement with just like a little JPEG or something, could not be the most verified source. So
Mhm.
then if you found out a piece of news from that, go check to see if it's being echoed anywhere else. Check out if you are seeing that in you know, legacy media or prominent and verified sources. Are they tweeting about it as well? And then if they are, is there an article about it, before just going right into full panic mode all
Mhm.
the time.
Right. Well, yeah, and I mean, like, you know, ideally in those situations, you get things right and you've reported a good piece of information, and, you know, people do with that what they will. But in the instances where you don't, where you make a mistake, how do you handle that?
Hopefully the mistake wasn't too much of a big fuck up, to say the least. We've all done it, myself included. Maybe not as much related to this, but I have in the past. I, I, I guess just don't let the ego that comes along with being a streamer try and cloud your ability to admit your limitations. That would probably be it, and just be forthwith. You know, where it's like, hey, by the way, I not only was mocking the U.S. intel about an imminent invasion of Ukraine by Russia, I was making
Mhm.
memes about it because of, you know, my
Joe
history.
Spinner got a
Oh, sorry,
tier 1 subscription.
sorry about that. That's the notification things. I'll turn this off.
Yeah, it's all
And
good.
um sorry, I not only was mocking their information about that, but I was making
Mhm,
memes about it, and that was just because, I was protesting during the Iraq War, before it took place, and I was inundated with the amount of U.S. information that was coming up in that period, which a lot of it turned out to be falsifiable, related
mhm,
to Ds, cake uranium, all this kind of stuff. And then I was like, oh, are we now going to believe the U.S. intel once again, which seems to be almost sounding war drums towards an event that no one wants, right? Obviously, no one would
mhm,
want Russia to invade Ukraine. And then as it continued to happen, they gave us like hardline dates like the 16th, and then nothing happened on the 16th. And then once again, it was just like, well, it just seems like the US is really trying to propagate consistently this narrative that is, in my opinion, not going to be true. And when it
mhm,
turned out to be true, that was a huge moment where I think a lot of people who had been saying that, especially myself, for so long, had to take a step back and be like, I was wrong.
mhm,
I was completely wrong about this, and all I can do is both apologize and hope to get better in the future, because again, streamers aren't journalists. They are
mhm.
opinion pieces. And unlike opinion pieces and pundits on Fox News, we're pundits without any editorial staff. Our
Mhm.
editorial staff is our chat. Basically, it's the people who
Right.
are watching you and who are going to be like, either outraged, and hopefully you listen to them. Like, hopefully you listen to hundreds of people who are like, "You shut the fuck up! What are you talking about? You're so wrong on this." But outside of that, like, even Fox News has an editorial staff that'll prevent, hopefully, Sean Hannity from saying something a little too beyond the pale. So
Mhm.
there would be that aspect as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of these things though where like I think that there are in that regard, you're definitely vulnerable to like, making mistakes and things like that. But at the same time, I think that from, major media, there's an expectation, especially given that they have teams and things like that, to be almost infallible, or at least to never get it wrong in this way where like it can be it, I think that they're like it's a double-sided coin, but like one of the problems with that is that there can be almost too much trust in institutions that ultimately do have like agendas or that are run by people. They are ultimately fallible, and I think that like maybe one of the upsides that streamers have, despite the fact that they don't have maybe teams vetting their information, is that they can be wrong and be like, "Yep, I got it wrong. I am a human being," and also like in doing so, you can serve as evidence that even people who seem authoritative aren't necessarily going to nail it all of the time. And especially in an instance like this, where there are just a lot of things that nobody really knows, that like you shouldn't just put all of your trust in one single individual or one network or whatever, because, you know, everyone's trying to make sense of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are a handful of streamers, and I'm not gonna start drama or tea on your
I
fundraiser here, but there are a handful of
mean,
streamers who
small amount of tea is a treat.
who are pushing basically like RT, Russia Today, talking points
Hmm.
on mainstream platform like Twitch, and there are partnered streamers who are doing that, and
Hmm.
and they are regurgitating a lot of points that I would myself feel are just ultimately incredibly falsifiable. um
Hmm.
some of them going as far as like like QAnon-esque conspiracy theories. So I mean, there's certainly, like, in terms of the editorializing being done by Twitch in regards to political streamers talking on this issue, there hasn't really seemed to be a large push from Twitch in terms of what their um I guess meters are, or what their barometer is. Like, I can't really get a sense for what stance they're trying to take. I think they're trying to allow for as much freedom of thought, freedom of speech as possible. While at the same time, I'm sure there's going to be limits to that.
Hmm.
Really, as things continue to accelerate.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too because like, did you see Twitch like update their misinformation policy last week?
no, how
Oh,
did they
okay.
also? Because
Then,
they've always had a very strong, like, I was trying to tell someone not too long ago that, like,
mhm,
you technically aren't allowed to present any false information on Twitch, like,
hmm,
just as a hardline rule. If you look at the, like, not just the TOS, but the very in the TOS where there's all these different chapters you can click on, like their views on sexual impropriety, their views
mhm,
on violence, their views on this. In the very first one, you're not supposed to present any false information. It's like very clearly worded,
Hmm. Um,
which all of us do, by the way.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. I mean that's unavoidable. But yeah. So basically, like their new policy. Here, I will scroll to the part of my article that states it, so I can just quote it instead of butchering it.
Mhm,
Um, let's see. Just go one off. Okay, so their new policy prohibits, and this is a quote, individuals or propaganda entities whose online presence is dedicated to disseminating misinformation with clear risks of real world harm. But it leaves room for, and this is another quote, one-off statements containing misinformation. Um, so yeah,
interesting.
it's interesting that you talk about people kind of, propagating what are essentially like RT talking points, because it's like that sort of like raises the question of where's the line? At what point do you become in Twitch's eyes basically like a propaganda entity or someone whose online presence is quote unquote dedicated to disseminating misinformation versus being someone who like the statements you're making, even if they tie in with these talking points, could be considered one off relative to your larger body of work.
Mhm. I mean, it's funny you'd say that. I just had someone pop in my chat saying "Hail Putin,"
Mm.
and then saying it over and over, and now they're just spamming the chat with it. So,
Oh,
there
wonderful.
you are. For oh, we're actually. Oh, okay. Sorry. No, I'm getting what are they called? A hate raid or whatever? Because there's like
Oh,
6
great.
accounts that are all spamming the same stuff right now. So,
Wonderful.
hey, it's happening in real time. If you ever wanted to see a hate raid take place in real time,
Yeah,
and
no, I
thank you
feel
to the
like
mods who are furiously deleting people's accounts.
yeah, yeah, hats off to the mods. Not an easy job, especially when that kind of a thing is going down. Um,
Mhm,
But yeah, no, like it is really interesting though, because Twitch, again, they roll out these policies and policies are written to sound unilateral, but then things like what you were describing can still happen on the platform. And because the language around these policies is so vague, you can make a case that they're like, well, that doesn't fall under the policy. Like, I mean, they
mhm.
maybe their accounts previously had not been dedicated to that level of misinformation or disinformation, so they get a pass. Or like again, a particular streamer, yeah, historically they've talked about other things, so they get a pass. Or like they mix in these kind of Russia talking points with other things, so who can really say?
Yeah.
And at that point, like, yeah, I mean, do you think that broadly Twitch does a good job containing this stuff, or do you think that they sort of, I think relative to even YouTube or whatever, have kind of gotten lucky in regards to people either using or not using their platform to spread misinformation around major political events?
Um, I think Twitch operates the same way that YouTube does, in that while they have a TOS and they have a
Mhm,
clear list of a clear guideline in how everything should be enforced,
mhm,
there isn't really any transparency as to a case by case basis why this has happened or why that has happened. I've been specifically banned for reasons where they'd give me a 30-day ban, and then when I would reply or appeal the ban with saying something like I thought I was doing the same thing that like a lot of other streamers were doing without
mhm,
naming names, they then reduced it to a 7-day ban right after that, right? But without any explanation as to why. I tried asking then afterwards, can you give me clarification as to why me saying this resulted in the less amount of days that I have it? But there's nothing in that regard to letting me
mhm,
know. But that's pretty much how giant tech companies operate, right? In terms of enforcing their TOS. um, I don't know if they've been tested like this in recent memory, where right now it is a platform where a lot of people are turning to for a variety of reasons, not
mhm,
just to get the newest news, but because obviously in a time where a lot of people might be afraid, or at a time when a lot of people might feel isolated either by the pandemic or just the world around them, there is a kind of like a cozy sense of being in an online community, especially if you're like watching one of your favorite streamers, you're getting to hang out with a lot of other people who you like and chat and stuff like that.
mhm.
You might have more people turning to Twitch, not just for the newest news, but just to feel um, a little bit more safe in amongst everything that's happening.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I also earlier this week I reported on uh sanction or US and European sanctions hitting Twitch streamers in Russia. And they were also saying basically that like even though they can no longer make money off of Twitch, because basically all their payment options have been taken away, that they're going to keep streaming in part because like as you're saying, it kind of like it keeps them sane, right? Like,
Mhm.
you know, things are bad. I mean, much more so in Ukraine than in Russia, but nonetheless, things are pretty bad for Russian citizens at this point too.
Oh,
And yeah,
absolutely.
if you've got a community of people who at the very least are saying like, "Hey, we care about you," and checking in on you and all of this stuff, then that's something, right? And it can be, as you're saying, like also kind of a distraction from everything else. If your stream doesn't just focus on like world events, one of the Russian streamers I talked to, yeah, he was like, "I'm going to continue to stream. I do believe in these hard times, a lot of people need a distraction from all the world events, and I keep a pretty like comfy, non-political broadcast." And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like that just seems, like one of these things that maybe people don't immediately think about when it comes to Twitch in relation to major conflicts. Is like, there's the obvious element of people talking about those conflicts on Twitch and reporting on them to some degree. But then there's also just like the need to be, for a little bit at least, to be separate from it. Not necessarily to ignore it, because I don't think that's a good thing for people to be doing when the stakes are this high and when people are suffering. But just to, take a breather, right?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there because I think there has been a lot of prominent Russian streamers and YouTubers. I don't know if I can swear on your show, so I'll just say no F words. This is one of
Yeah,
the YouTube
good policy. We
streamers.
generally try to avoid swearing, so thank you.
Okay, good. I didn't know because I swear
No,
quite a
it's
bit on
all good, it's all good.
my okay.
I
But
don't
anyways,
personally care.
No F Word is the name of a really prominent Russian streamer who has been
Mhm,
obviously an outspoken. He's very against the war. Against Putin's policies as much as you can be as someone who directly lives in Russia, all that kind of
mhm,
stuff. And been very consistent in his messaging on both those subjects. And at the same time, is obviously now cut off from any form of being able to get paid for what he does in Russia, as well
mhm,
as that I was reading your article, and yes, there's a number of Twitch streamers who are in the same boat, and um, I don't know if anyone was really expecting to see as rapidly as it took place, not just sanctions coming from countries themselves, but coming from corporations. Like the
mhm,
corporate sanctions have ramped up so rapidly and so quickly
mhm,
that I think that was something that no one could have either predicted or understood what the ramifications were going to be as they were taking place faster and faster.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really has, and it's one of these things where, and I'm curious about how, like, on your stream you discuss sanctions, because I think that, like, the goal obviously of sanctions is to prevent a more active armed conflict between countries like the U.S. and Russia, but at the same time, like historically, sanctions, the impact of them in other countries have been mixed, and generally speaking, when we're talking about matters of class, they impact, the lower class and people who are already vulnerable. And then, like in a country like Russia, for example, which has a very calcified upper class, has leadership, and then also oligarchs, like those people are pretty insulated from these impacts. And so it's like, I guess like when you're talking about this, what kind of context do you give on that front? And like, how do you sort of depict the fact that these sanctions are having impacts on, real and often normal people, many of whom oppose the war?
Yeah, of course. Well, that's pretty much usually been my messaging is that sanctions affect the regular populace the worst, and I in no way would want to advocate for something that is going to result in obviously mass starvation of potentially millions of people as a result of economic sanctions being done. There's absolutely no control, I suppose, you could have as a citizen over what corporate sanctions are going to be or what form they're going to take. As opposed to the sanctions of your government
Mhm,
in that case. I think what is being done right now is there is a form of economic warfare that is being employed to try and continue pressure towards the administration of Vladimir Putin in order to either de-escalate or to end the invasion.
mhm,
Whether or not that is actually going to have the effect that everyone is hoping for, or if it's going to create a situation in which now the price of oil is incredibly valuable. The ability for Russian oligarchs who would stand to make the most money from perhaps the potential sale of oil to new markets or different markets because they're being cut off from existing ones, are they going to be directly as affected as everyone else, such as just regular Russian citizens? Is it going to achieve the effect that you're looking for, or is it going to effectively cause mass starvation?
mhm.
Um, of course, is not something that you want. Um, I would be a complete, uh, you know, joke of a person if I tried to say that I understand more about the implications of economic sanctions than people who know worlds more about this topic than I do. Obviously,
Mhm,
what I talk about when I do reporting on this is, this is what I've been studying and reading from a variety of literature, usually from a leftist perspective, usually coming at it from other people whom I trust on this topic, or news
mhm,
sources like Democracy Now and stuff like that. But yeah, it seems to be somewhat uncharted territory in that, the financial collapse of the ruble that is happening so quickly in real time.
mhm,
What effect is that going to have? Is it going to be a situation in which a despotic leader like Vladimir Putin, is he going to cave to external pressure? Is he going to cave to global pressure? There's a lot of things that I never expected to happen that are happening right now, such as
mhm,
the UN resolution vote, seeing the amount of countries that normally would be hardline allies of Russia abstaining in their decision on that vote. That is something I didn't expect to see. Where we're seeing China take a very neutral position in this, rather than one
mhm,
that is directly backing Russia, right? And saying that they too want to see de-escalation of violence that is taking place in Ukraine. So again, I don't know what this all would be leading towards. Obviously, I think Chelsea Manning put it really well. There's no good outcome, but there's less horrible one. And I
mhm.
guess we want to steer towards the less horrible outcomes, ideally.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, but I mean, there are a lot of interesting things that you mentioned in there. Um, and yeah, one of them that I think is worth kind of touching on is that, again, as you were saying, like you are able to acknowledge that you don't know as much as some people. And additionally,
Oh, hell
like I think you're able to acknowledge in a way, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of just like streamers being individual people, not having to adhere to kind of the way that major networks portray themselves, which is like above everything, both in terms of like level of knowledge and in terms of like a lack of biases. That you're able to acknowledge what your sources are, which are often like left leaning or leftist in nature. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, I mean, like, do you think
I'm
that that appeals more to especially to like kind of younger people who are coming up on sort of influencer culture and stuff like that? That they like to know who exactly is telling them, what's going on in the world, and also where that person is coming from, what informs their viewpoints.
And sorry, how does what is your question related to that?
Do you think that do you think that that kind of approach appeals more to like kind of the more current younger generation than maybe like a network broadcast style approach of like a CNN or whatever does, simply because
Ah, okay.
you're able to actually wear your biases on your sleeve, which is not an intrinsically bad thing in my mind.
Um, I don't know, because a lot of the times when we poll my audience, they don't skew 100% towards Zoomers. Like, there's obviously
Mhm.
younger members of the audience, but it's usually in the higher 20s to early 30s, in
Well,
terms of people.
I will give you some demographic information actually that's
Okay,
interesting.
here we go.
By the standards of legacy media, that is still extremely young. It's
Oh,
really
okay.
funny because, like, to the internet, I'm a boomer.
Yeah.
I'm in my early
Yeah, me
30s,
too.
so
Me too. In my late
I'm a
20s.
dinosaur.
Mhm.
But to legacy media, we are like infants. We are
Mhm.
babies. Um, yeah, no, I will say that, let's see, because I'm not sure if I can actually share this information, I'll obscure it some. I will say that a certain legacy publication that I know quite well, like the average readership age is like above 50. And so anything below that is considered young. So
Gotcha.
anyway, just some fun information there.
Okay, so my audience is you're younger. I
Yes.
suppose I think there was a big interest and a surging interest in leftist ideas
Mhm,
post the first political run of Bernie Sanders, that I think has grown over time. But all that being said, looking at polling in my country, in Canada, for example, I have been astonished to see how ready citizens in this country are for things like enacting a no-fly zone. I don't know if that's because they don't understand the repercussions of what a no-fly zone is. I don't
mhm.
know if they don't understand what that would mean, which would effectively be leading, the U.S. And NATO allies into a direct conflict, a military escalation. with Russia. Something that I think
Mhm.
everyone should be on the same page is the thing we want to avoid, which is what I would assume. But when I see polling in this country, Canadians, even if it shows how the question was asked, seem to be overwhelmingly in favor of a no-fly zone, and I cannot for the life of me understand why.
Mhm.
It could be either A, they're not entirely sure of the repercussions of what that would mean, or B, they are seeing just the horrors and the devastation that is happening to Ukraine, and they feel helpless. And as a result of feeling helpless, they feel like, isn't this something we can do? Isn't there something we can do to stop this? To stop this now, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's why one of the things I'm also trying to reinforce in my messaging is just to get people to understand what the implications of that would be,
Mhm.
and yeah, and to try and prevent that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that's very interesting to me because I've seen a lot of streamers on Twitch talk about the idea of a no-fly zone, and I think that across the board, they've pretty consistently emphasized what it would mean more broadly, which is what you're saying, an actual direct conflict. And I think that in maybe more traditional news media, the tendency has been to use the phrase, but to contextualize it a little bit less. I mean, I've seen like, let's see, I think that there was like a what MSNBC segment or something the other day where like they really went into it. They brought on somebody who was like very much of the stance of like, if we do this, there will be a conflict. It could be really, really bad.
Yeah.
But I think more broadly, people hear that term and it just sounds like a set of rules, right? Like it's just like, oh yeah, we just like say this thing, and then they'll be like, okay, okay, that like in addition to sanctions, now we're gonna back off. But it's like, no, to have a no-fly zone, you've got to enforce it, right? And
Yeah,
like, I think
it's not
maybe
an
the part of the message that doesn't get across is what that enforcement would mean.
yeah, that could be the aspect of it. I mean, even worse than that, I've seen so many, and I don't want to alienate any of your listeners, but like blue checkmark liberals do this kind of like nuclear war would be very bad,
Mhm.
but but
Right.
and that but is always where I'm just aghast. I am like, in what way do you think there can be some kind of, let's just say, measured nuclear response or measured tactical nuclear deployment? Like
Mhm.
this, these aren't the kind of war. I don't know. Part of me worries sometimes. Maybe it has something to do with people uh, getting the source of their information on nuclear proliferation from Fallout or
Mhm.
something like that. I'm not entirely sure.
I mean,
Uh,
also, are they paying attention to what Fallout's about? Because in those
yeah,
games, the world's looking pretty bad.
yeah, it's not the ideal future, to say the
Mhm.
least. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
it genuinely disturbs me to see that. I think that should be the kind of life-ending event that everyone wants to avoid at all talks. Sorry,
Right.
at all costs.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to go into the media angle of it for a second, I think also like, and I'm always hesitant to ascribe anything like to solely to media portrayals because I think that's overstated. I think like, that kind of argument ultimately leads you to like video games cause violence. And I think that's kind of a
Oh yeah,
ridiculous argument to make on its
oh
face.
it's absurd. It's absurd.
But I do think that like media narratives are more subtle in the ways that they inform how we might think. And I think that a pervasive kind of like point of view represented in media, at least where it concerns, apocalypses and whatever, is the one of, the survivor. And I think that
Right.
because that's always the perspective character, I think that a lot of people maybe have a tendency unconsciously, not necessarily like saying these words in their head, but thinking like, I'm going to be that person. That's
Mhm.
going to be me. So like, yeah, maybe it'll be bad for everyone else, but I'll figure it out. I'll use my hard scrabble attitude to pull me through it all, and I'll,
And my
go
purple
hunt
bucket.
in the wastelands.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
I wanna be perfectly clear. I don't buy into the narrative at all that, I think, violent video games or,
Oh
sexualized
yeah,
video
no.
games, any of that negatively impacts kids. I think that's, been absurd for a very long time.
Mhm.
Um, what I feel more is that I think there hasn't really been, a lot of, mainstream education on the subject of what exactly nuclear war entails, what exactly nuclear bombs are, how do they interact with the environment, what fallout is, what the actual devastation and effects will be, and how it is
Mhm.
pretty much a zero end game. There is not a tactical, measured nuclear war between two superpowers. It
Mhm.
is like the utmost importance that is avoided at all costs. But I agree with you in the sense that I think some people, because I remember when bath salts were being accused of turning people into zombies. And I know this sounds like a really weird tangent, but I remember when that was on the news, I had a lot of people who I was friends with on Facebook who were very excited because they thought this was the start of the zombie movie.
Oh my
And they were all
god.
like, holy shit, it's happening. This is so cool. And I was like, what about zombie movies has ever made you think this is something I want to be in? But they were just like, I don't know. It's just like everything resets to zero, you know, and it's no longer about all these systems and empires and
Mhm.
governments. We all just have to get to our nearest like Costco and then grab our our shotguns, and we're going to be the heroes of that era. And so maybe
Mhm.
it's that kind of romanticization of it, maybe that leads a
Right.
little bit people into thinking this could be something for me, a new future, a reset.
Yeah, yeah, which is like really grim, right? Because it speaks to, I think, the way that our society has evolved, that things are so dire for people that they look at like their current present existence, and then they look at one that is like A, wholly unknown, and B, like likely just devastating. And they're like, I picked that one. That one
Yeah.
seems better. Like
Of them
uh,
all. Well, you know, with preppers, apparently there's this actual like a psychological evaluation of that kind of mindset where
mhm,
they feel in the future they will have advantages they don't have in everyday life because they are the only ones who are going to have the resources, the
mhm.
materials, the cultures, and the prepper buckets, and they may be the new emperors and lords of some dystopian future.
Right, right. Which I mean, again, is a very like, it's a very capitalistic mentality, right? It's
Oh
just
yeah,
like you're hoarding a different kind of wealth at that point. You're hoarding what
yeah.
will be the presumed wealth of the future as opposed to the current wealth of now. Though a lot of people who are preppers are often have a fair amount of money, so they're hoarding in the present tense as well. Um, but yeah, yeah. I mean, in any case, it's certainly it's certainly an odd, or not odd, but it's just like a very, to me, sad mentality to embrace. That said, that's also like I think another side of maybe covering something that comes up or covering all of this that comes up less on kind of mainstream networks, which is the more environmental angle, right? I've seen some streamers on Twitch, for example, advocate for like, okay, if we want to end this conflict, or rather, at least like kind of take away Russia's power in the future of conflicts like this, because this is probably not going anywhere, no matter how this resolves,
Mhm.
um, would be to, like divest from oil and gas and like immediately
Yeah.
double down on, sources of green energy and turn that into something that is pervasive across the country. Is that something that you've talked about in your broadcasts?
Yeah, and it's something I still advocate for. I would recommend a new article by Naomi Klein in The Intercept, where she
Hmm.
really kind of ties all these things together and puts the focus on oil and energy and how rather than because this is all taking place when we just got that new climate report, which of course
Hmm.
is always it's like things are so much worse than we originally thought.
Yep.
But
Every time.
every time, in amongst everything else, it could be a golden opportunity for humanity, especially countries that are now situating themselves in opposition to Russia and their dependence perhaps on oil from other sources, to look towards migrating towards greener sources of energy and even controversial greener sources of energy like nuclear power or
Hmm.
things like that, right? Which I know is a hot topic for a lot of people, but we don't have a lot of time left and we don't have a lot of options. And if right now the geopolitics of oil is consistently bringing us into global events, and the economics of it all is making us either more or less dependent on what was previously considered the axis of evil, which now is becoming the axis of convenience, it seems. The once enemies of the United States, like Iran and Venezuela, are now going to be welcomed as besties if they can provide us with alternative energy sources. It would also be a time, yes, I completely advocate for moving towards uh, greener energy and
Hmm.
less reliance on fossil fuels.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just one of these things where like, you know, it I see this mentality kind of expressed a lot in certain circles, many of them like left leaning, and then often from like streamers on Twitch. But it still feels like that idea, at least in terms of like kind of penetrating upwards into more mainstream outlets, into sort of the things that like my parents would watch. Like there sort of seems to be a cutoff that I think might be born of, for example, just people who have a lot of power and influence being like, well, if we did that, we'd have to change everything. That would require a massive scale overhaul. That would mean a lot of people who currently make a lot of money off of the present system would make less money. And so, like, when you advocate for these things, right? Because you were talking about, and I don't disagree with you that like we don't have a ton of time left. Just looking at these reports, it is laid pretty bare. I mean, like, how do you maintain, kind of a sense of hope that this might occur?
Drugs.
Hmm.
No, to be fair, okay, so if you're gonna talk about things like de-escalation, um, I think one of the things that a lot of people kind of gloss over when it comes to the Green New Deal, and sorry, my voice is cracking a bit right
No,
now,
it's
but
okay. Yeah,
when it
COVID.
comes to that,
It's fine.
is it cannot exist in and of simply this kind of fairy tale that we just switch over, like we flip a light switch and
Mm,
then we move from fossil fuels to clean energy. There are tens of thousands of jobs at stake, and in no way do I think that tens of thousands of workers who are working in coal mines, who are working in energy that may be considered not part of future tech, should suddenly all lose their jobs en masse. And so we have just swaths of unemployed Canadians and unemployed Americans, either working in the tar sands or working in fracking, who suddenly don't have an opportunity. There should be provisions implemented by the government in order to be able to have training programs
mhm,
for people who want to leave those industries and allow them to transition into greener jobs. And it has to be part of the assumed cost. Um, Mixed in with, I think you have to have brave politicians who are willing to stop subsidizing oil and gas companies, just full stop. And in certain cases in Canada, I would advocate for things like nationalizing the oil and gas industry specifically, because it used to be nationalized in this country. And ever since it's become privatized, the expansion of extraction and in more dangerous forms of extraction in this country, such as the tar sands, which is just one of the worst ways you can possibly extract bitumen from the earth. My God,
mhm.
have become more proliferated, which is obviously a massive problem.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, so getting kind of back on the topic of, I guess, like coverage on Twitch, and you said your voice is kind of bothering you, so I don't want to keep you for too much longer because I don't want you to, not be able to talk tomorrow. That would be unfortunate.
I can
Um,
answer one very salient question. Just make it really good.
all right. I'm not sure if this is my best question necessarily, but I think it is pertinent to everything else we've discussed, so it kind of puts a bow on it. Um, I think that there are at least some people I've noticed, like, as you're saying, there are a lot of people who are like consistent in your chat or in the chat of other streamers, particularly like people like Hassan. And it seems like they're probably using Twitch as their main news source here. Or if not that, then at least like a very supplementary news source that kind of allows them to, it basically curates the news for them, right? Like, because there's so much happening and there's so many different sources of information coming at them, they're like, okay, well, a streamer can at least help me make sense of this. I mean, like, more broadly, how do you feel about that development, the fact that people are doing that at all? And then B, how do you feel about the responsibility you personally have as a result of that?
Um, I think the interaction of Twitch is what makes it unique and what
Hmm.
makes the experience different from any other form of media that came before it. Whereas, when I was a kid, I mean, I'm a very small streamer. If you're going to mention Hassan, we're in
Hmm.
different worlds. The guy's
Right,
like,
right.
in John Stewart levels of fame. Like, but the difference between Hassan and John Stewart is that when you're watching John Stewart, you wouldn't be able to talk to him. You wouldn't be able to send him a
Mhm.
message that most likely is intended to piss him off, because that's the majority of people
Yeah.
in Hassan's chat. That's what
Oh,
they're
yeah,
trying to
they
do.
love to stun lock him. It's,
Yeah, they
it's
love
really
to stun
something.
lock and make him mauled. So I
Yeah.
think that I love that aspect about Twitch and Twitch streaming. However,
Mhm,
yeah, there's absolutely now more than ever a massive responsibility both on the streamers, and another shout out to mods, because the mods are the ones who are keeping chat safe for most of the time. Like, we just got about I'd say 300 or 400 accounts, just all of a sudden, all flash joining me while I was talking to you, all with
mhm.
these names that clearly show that they're part of Nick Fuentes, Groiper kind
Ugh.
of yeah, associated. And if it wasn't for mods all of a sudden just furiously ban
Mhm,
accounts, right? Then while I was talking to you, I would have been this entire conversation just distracted with all my chat flashing with all this kind of, like, glory to Russia stuff
mhm.
flowing that was happening. So the mods are really important as well. And yeah, there's obviously a huge amount of responsibility on the streamer if you're going to talk about issues that are of this kind of seriousness. And this doesn't just apply to Ukraine. I mean, if you're going to talk
Mhm,
about issues related to trans kids and the war on trans kids in both the United States and other countries abroad, yeah, there's responsibility on you to educate yourself on that topic so that if you are going to advocate about it, you can give people who are watching you, I guess, the best possible messaging and
mhm,
ammo for themselves to take, and then be able to, argue with their family who might be a little bit transphobic but not be aware of it, or whatever the case may be. So that yeah, the responsibility is high, and I think all anyone can really be is transparent at this point.
mhm,
Just be like, I'm not a journalist, I'm an entertainer, and I am an opinion piece. I am slanted, I'm biased. Here are my biases. I'm very left leaning. I'm
mhm,
obviously going to give you the news from that, but I don't intentionally lie. Like, I'm not intentionally here to Alex Jones you into buying my soy pills. I'm here to entertain you, and I'll hopefully correct myself when I get it wrong, and that would
mhm.
probably be the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, just one quick follow-up on that because I'm curious about this. But I mean,
Yeah,
like, you are talking from a place of, clearly like the best of intentions and things like that. Um, and if we're talking
no,
about more
that
traditional
doesn't
news media,
matter.
right?
That,
Exactly.
like,
If
good
we're
intentions don't matter anymore.
Yeah. And so, like, if we're talking about more traditional news media, there are systems in place to at least incentivize telling the truth, right? Like, there are direct consequences for when you mess up, both from without and within. And I think that, like, the at least from the outside looking in, for streamers, those consequences are at least a lot more informal. And so do you think that on the platform you have, or like any given streamer has incentives to remain to adhere to what you're saying here, to like be open about your biases and to like correct yourself when you mess up? Or do you think it's just like, kind of person to person, whatever they decide to do, that's what they end up doing?
Well, I mean, outside of the TOS, outside of
Mhm,
Twitch actually cracking down on you, the only accountability really comes from either your viewers who
mhm.
could just suddenly decide, I hate the fact that Lance has gone from talking about lefty stuff to wanting to sell us all this Brain Force Plus, so I'm not going to watch him anymore. So they just leave you en masse, right? Or other streamers calling you out is the other one, right?
Mhm,
Because suddenly it'll be a big drama cycle where someone else is like, "Hey, by the way, you lied about this and you were factually incorrect and you won't correct yourself. I'm
mhm,
going to put you on blast." That's kind of the closest thing to accountability comes. Sorry, that comes to streamers in this.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because on one hand, it's accountability from your peers, and I mean,
Mm,
I do think that means something. I think that people often respond to their peers calling them out, at least in some way, shape, or form. But I also think that, like, for better or worse, often for worse, drama is one of the currencies of the internet, and
yeah,
like drama can often be good for people. It can be good for their public profile, meaning that it can also be an incentive to make a mistake or to behave disingenuously. I mean, I think we see this a lot in kind of, in terms of like uh political influencers and stuff. Like, I mean, a lot of, a
yeah.
lot of politics influencers behave pretty purposefully in bad faith. Um yeah.
Are you going to list names? Are we going to hash this
Yeah.
out? Or are we...
I mean, like,
no, no,
you know.
I'm totally joking. But yeah, I, I agree with you.
Mhm,
There are people who I guess utilize the currency of it almost exclusively without trying to um, worry about so much the consequences. But
mhm,
hopefully they're identified for what they are. If all you do is intentionally manufacture or artificially manufacture drama for
mhm,
views without any substance behind it, then I hope people identify that kind of a show or streamer for what they are. Not someone
mhm,
who's actually interested in talking about the news, but is interested in generating controversy through talking about the news. And there
mhm.
should probably be a distinction between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, again, it feels like it comes down to, like, it feels like it comes down to kind of, the actions and perceptions of, again, A, your peers, so other people who are using the platform to broadcast, and then B, audiences. I mean, it's another example of kind of, the ways that I think modern social media have kind of have cut out a lot of middlemen. In some ways, for in some ways that I think help, like they democratize information and stuff like that, but in other ways that mean that accountability is less direct and maybe less consistent. And so, like, Is that good? Is that bad? I think those are very simple terms on which to view anything. But I mean, it's certainly like it is, right?
I think we just need more ego death on a regular basis. We should maybe there should be a requirement at a certain level once you reach like 2,000 live viewers that you
Uh-huh.
have to take like 10 grams of mushrooms and experience
There
just
we go.
yeah, the strongest form of ego death possible, and then come back refreshed and being like, I am but, an atom in our collective experience.
Yeah, no, that should be, yeah, exactly. That should be all mid-sized to large streamers should just
Yeah.
like one day come back and be like, I'm just a small grain of sand on the beach that is the universe. And
Yeah,
someday the
exactly.
the ocean will wash me away and nothing will change.
Yeah. And I'd just like to say for the record, please do not take 10 grams of mushrooms, even in Roblox. It most likely will hurt you.
Oh yeah, no, that doesn't really sound
Harm
like a super
reduction,
good idea.
use moderation or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanna throw it out there.
Yeah, no. Probably especially don't do that in Roblox. There are a lot of kids there.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, that seems on like the ideal note to end on. Maybe the best possible one. Honestly, I was just trying to guide the conversation to that point this whole time from the beginning. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for joining us, for
Thank you so
coming on
much
the
for having me,
show.
man. It's always a
Yeah,
pleasure.
yeah, of course. And yeah, have a good rest of your day. And also, I hope you feel better from COVID and all of that. Mm, yep.
I'm getting stronger by the second.
Yeah. Go take some lozenges.
Take more. All right. Cheers.
All right. Later. Okay. Cool. So thank you to everybody who joined us for that segment of the show. However, we're not done. Because the way that the show works is that we run down a lot of different news. So that was kind of our main story of the day. We are now moving on to other news from this week that I'm going to break down in kind of for lack of a better term, that I'm sure that a lot of you who came over from the Surf stream understand, React Andy fashion. Um, so kind of sticking with the theme of Russia and Ukraine to begin with. It is not just impacting Twitch, obviously, it's impacting a lot of various companies in reaction to, I think, both sanctions and kind of like their own decision making. This week, both Sony and Nintendo have announced that they have suspended sales of their video game platforms in Russia. So, as part of a showcase yesterday, State of Play, where Sony like shows off new games and stuff, um, they also announced that they are suspending sales of the PlayStation in Russia, which kind of goes along with what a lot of video game companies already have. I think the first kind of domino in that progression was CD Projekt Red, the creators of Cyberpunk and The Witcher and games like that. And so they have also they were the first. A ton of other video game companies followed in their wake, and now we've got kind of the big ones. So that being Sony in this case, um, which is I mean, again, in line with what other people are doing, but nonetheless pretty huge. Nintendo, which tends not to weigh in on a lot of things like this. Like, I mean, I feel like Microsoft and Sony tend to feel the pressure more of needing to like make statements on major world events and, kind of be part of these moments. Nintendo, on the other hand, like they tend to sort of just they're like, yeah, we make games and we reveal games and then we release games and we never do anything else. But even they announced that they are delaying Advanced Wars or the remake of Advanced Wars because of the invasion of Ukraine. Because it'd be kind of a weird time to release a game about war. So yeah, they said in light of recent world events, we've made the decision to delay Advanced Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. What a name! Which was originally scheduled to release on Nintendo Switch on April 8th. Please stay tuned for updates. Blah blah blah. So yeah, they've decided to delay the game, which makes a fair amount of sense given the circumstances. And then, yeah, oh, this is kind of funny. Kotaku managed to get a statement from them out of it. And they said, while we have nothing to announce on the subject, we'd like to express our concern for all those affected on the conflict. It's like a very, I don't know, if you ever want to like point to the like ultimate example of a company making a statement on this topic, just like we have nothing to announce, but we got like sympathy or whatever. Like that's just, I don't know, that doesn't sounds inhuman. It's a very odd one. Oh, James Jackson is asking a very pertinent question. So yeah, while we're on the subject, speaking of Kotaku, we covered the fact that Kotaku was on strike last week on the show, and had members of their staff on to talk about why they were striking, basically because their parent company Geomedia was refusing to offer them a fair contract. So good news, the strike is over. um, yeah, so basically the strike ended over the weekend. I actually ended up going to the picket line for a little bit around the time that management agreed to kind of sit down with striking workers again. And yeah, so that part happened on Friday. They began bargaining again. They bargained late into the night on Friday and into Saturday. And it actually seemed like it wasn't going to work out again. It seemed like basically they had gotten very close to an agreeable contract. And then at the last second, management was like, yeah, but we're not going to agree to a few of these stipulations around pay and healthcare. And so it seemed like they're going to have to strike this week too. And then on Sunday, Geo Media suddenly came back to the table and said, like, all right, here we're going to offer you basically the contract you wanted to begin with. And so yeah, workers were like, cool, that's what we wanted. We're set. Let's do it. Let's sign the thing and get back to work. So yeah, Kotaku is back in action. And yeah, there's a good piece actually, the one that I'm looking at right now, written by one of the editors of the site, Alexandra Hall, about kind of like what what the entire process entailed, and then also just like the impact of being in a union. And I think this piece is actually more valuable to regular people on the latter basis, just because you hear a lot about like why unionizing helps workers and stuff like that, but this is kind of a like direct breakdown of it, a like direct exploration from somebody who was professedly, prior to being part of Kotaku, pro union, but who had, not really ever directly interfaced with one, and kind of seen what can come of workers collectively bargaining and working together and engaging even in direct action in a strike, to get what they want and what they need in order to live in a city like New York. Though on the upside, one of the stipulations of the contract, as it now stands, is that workers who are remote are not required to move. And thank goodness for that, because I live in New York, and I will just say it is so expensive to live here. I Wonderful city, but oh my god, like it's hard to have money. So, but yeah, in any case, so that all worked out well. And if you get a chance, if you talk to any of these folks, make sure to congratulate them, because the other thing this article breaks down very well is that striking isn't just not working. Striking is another form of very hard work, organizing, keeping people abreast of what's going on, ensuring that you maintain momentum, and then, of course, being physically outside of an office and walking around for like, basically the duration of a workday is a lot of physical effort and is exhausting. Like pretty much everyone I know who is involved in this. Also, disclosure that I maybe should have made earlier for the sake of this stream. I used to work at Kotaku, but everyone I know who was part of the strike by the time Friday rolled around was just exhausted. They were just done. But yeah, I guess good thing too that it ultimately worked out in their favor, because if it hadn't, then they would probably be even more exhausted as of today. But yeah, so everything worked out on that front, and it's good now. Hooray! Um, so yeah, let's see. Going back to other stories, because that was kind of a digression. Um, yeah, very Nintendo statement. Huh. But anyway, that was kind of a digression. Um, so other things that have happened this week that kind of tie into well, let's see. What story do I want to hit next? Actually, there are a few that sort of tie into what we were talking about earlier with Ukraine and Russia. But I want to because today's episode was kind of like very Twitch focused. I do want to hit some Twitch news really fast, because some pretty major things have happened today. So one of them is that Twitch is currently engaged in the process of mass banning streamers in the Middle East, um, because of tax evasion. And I can actually provide some details on this that other people don't necessarily have. I wanted to report out a story on this, but I'm not sure if I'm going to have time this week. So, whatever. I can just give all of you the world exclusive. It's not really an exclusive. But yeah, so basically what happened is that late last month, a lot of streamers in the Middle East realized that Twitch was withholding payments from them, and they didn't know what was going on. They made a fuss about it online. It seemed like Twitch was, had made some kind of a mistake. But in reality, what they were doing, Twitch at the time said that the payment issue was due to a discrepancy with certain tax information provided during the onboarding process. What this basically amounted to, as it turns out, was tax evasion. And so Twitch then, according to people that I've talked to, spent a very long time deliberating on how to handle this. And the reason for that is that a lot of these Middle Eastern streamers, there are hundreds of them. And like, yeah, streamer bans, which is an account that basically informs people of when major streamers get banned, partnered streamers and things like that. Uh, they are talking about like, yeah, a huge influx of tweets they had today because so many streamers got suspended on the back of this. Yeah, so here we go. But anyway, what happened is Twitch deliberated for a while, specifically because didn't mean to hit that, but anyway, specifically because they were sort of at a point where they recognized why streamers were committing tax evasion, and it wasn't like as nefarious as you might think. So essentially, um, streamers end up like as a result of taxes having to give or having to have quite a bit of their pay withheld um, in the Middle East due to exchange rates and stuff like that. And so a lot of these streamers were like, well, we want to get around this because we want our money, and deservedly they deserve their money. They work hard. Um, and so they were using services like Old Noobs. And so Old Noobs is a third party service that helps out streamers with what is known as like Twitch tax, meaning basically money that Twitch would take as a result of the region that they are in. And so the thing about this is that, like, if you didn't know, if somebody just sent this to you, you might mistake it for being kind of official. Like, I mean, they use Twitch branding, they use the Twitch logo, they say Twitch tax. And so basically, I think Twitch looked at this and said, well, it wouldn't be entirely fair of us to just fully blanket ban these people for tax evasion because the situation is more complicated. And like these people weren't necessarily trying to be intentionally dishonest. And so instead, what's happening is Twitch is now resolved to give people 30 days to like do their taxes the normal way. And then if they do that, then like so their bans, by the way, are temporary. It's only 3 days. So they'll be banned for 3 days, and they do their taxes, and then everything's back to normal. If they don't do their taxes the normal way, then they risk having partnership or affiliate status revoked. That's sort of the situation as it stands right now. So yeah, it's this one. It's an odd thing though. I think there's been a lot of kind of Twitch being used in ways that Twitch didn't necessarily intend in other countries where we don't necessarily, because Twitch is, a US based platform, and a lot of the streamers who get the most attention are based in the West. But yeah, there have been like a lot of things like this recently. Like, for example, there's also, let's see, what was that? Um, there was the Twitch money laundering stuff. I'll just put my own story. But yeah, there was Twitch money laundering in Turkey earlier this year, or rather, it took place last year, but I reported on it earlier this year, in which police ended up like detaining a lot of people, and it was this another thing that kind of like flew under the radar until Twitch noticed it and acted on it, because like this is the nature of something being a gargantuan platform and like being one that's growing in terms of mainstream prominence and understanding, and also in terms of international prominence, is people use it in all sorts of ways in different countries. So yeah, I think that these two stories are kind of a kind in ways that you might not immediately sort of think of. Um, let's see. So there's that, and then what are some other stories of the week? Very quickly, there's also this whole mess, honestly, with so basically last week there was there's a PC building company called Artesian Builds, and they basically got, as PC Gamer puts it, demolished on Twitter last week after a small streamer complained that the company denied her a sweepstakes prize based on the size of her Twitch following. This company kind of had a reputation for doing sweepstakes where they would give away PCs to Twitch streamers. And of course, what they get out of this is free advertising. And so I'm sure they looked at a smaller Twitch streamer who won per the rules of their giveaway. And they're like, wait, this won't get us any attention. So, like, we're going to deny them this expensive piece of hardware. And so people came after them for that. And then, like, that then gave way to all of this just like scrutinizing of their company. And it turns out that they were not in great shape as a company generally. And so then that led to like a potential employee led buyout of the company. And now that flash forward a few days later, and the company's just shutting down, which is like life comes at you fast, right? Like going from being a company that like, had this business that was doing seemingly from the outside looking in reasonably well to every Twitch streamer coming for you to shutting down in the span of just about a week is bonkers. Yeah, let's see. Update to this also. Gamers Nexus has published a detailed breakdown of the events surrounding the apparent demise of Artesian Builds, including emails with CEO Noah Katz and employee messages on the company Slack channels. Yeah. So, like, it is this just full collapse that occurred in a very short amount of time. Um, and again, it sort of seems like I don't want to say deservedly so because anything involving a company shutting down is probably very complicated. And of course, there are employees at these companies that are generally, they don't deserve to lose their jobs. That's terrible. But nonetheless, uh, I think that in this case, they were doing some things that were kind of dodgy, and I guess it's the way the cookie crumbles. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, and other big Twitch news of today, and this is one that it's hard to really talk about in extreme detail. But Dr. Disrespect, current YouTube streamer, former Twitch streamer, has announced that he, and I quote, based on his own statement, has resolved his legal dispute with Twitch. No party admits any wrongdoing, and they are moving on. Basically, last year, Dr. Disrespect announced that he was in the process of suing Twitch in the wake of his 2020 ban from the platform with little explanation. And so, it seemed at the time that there's going to be a big legal conflict and, it would resolve all of this all once and for all and all of these things. And yeah, it did not, is the short version. Oh, yeah. And for those curious, Dr. Disrespect is not coming back to Twitch. He remains banned indefinitely. Or at least that's the impression I get. I mean, I would assume based on this fact, because if he was not banned anymore, he'd be leaving quite a lot of money on the table. So I think you can extrapolate from this that he will not be back. The reason behind his ban remains shrouded in mystery. Let's see. Oh yeah, let's see. Saving the biggest story till last. Smart Wapo. Yeah, no. I you know I will say that the information as to why he got banned like is very, it remains pretty tightly locked down for reasons that are hard to discuss. It's a story that I've tried to report a lot over the course of the past couple of years, and I know more than I can say, but I can't say it because it remains more or less impossible to confirm. So maybe one day this is a story that I or somebody else will break. I would say that it probably won't remain shrouded in mystery forever, but still, for now, you know, that's just how things are going to remain, which is a bummer because I think that people deserve to know. I think that both from the perspective of maybe why Dr. Disrespect got banned and also from the perspective of uh, if a company, if something like Twitch is a major platform and they imply simply by the way that they conduct themselves that they deserve the right to decide who gets to use their platform and who doesn't, then I think that they should also inform the public more broadly why they are making the decisions they make. I think that that's pretty crucial in a time when platforms more or less control the flow of information. But anyway, for now, this is just the state of things. Oh well. Oh yeah, let's see. Going back to the previous story for a moment. Simple rule with giveaways: when you announce it to the world, you are a competition to win a prize. The prize slash money is no longer yours. Yeah, pretty much. Um, but anyway, moving on to other stories, kind of outside the. Oh wait, let's see. I like the bad faith negotiating while threatening to go to Mixer, even though he had insider info that Mixer was about to shut down theory. Uh, I, again, I can neither confirm nor deny anything. I can just say no, that's not correct. I all conspiracy theories that you've seen online are wrong. I mean, at least if the information that I have is correct. Uh, And just in general, with anything like this, like this will naturally generate a ton of conspiracy theories because there's so little information out there. But random people on the internet just do not have a good way of understanding a lot of these things. So take anything that you see people saying with a grain of salt. And that's just like generally good advice when it comes to misinformation is when there's a like major event and nobody can really say for sure what's going on. Almost any theory that people generate is just not worth giving the time of day to. Um, but yeah, let's see. Moving on from that into sort of more broadly video game related stories. A thing that we reported this week, kind of going into things surrounding video game industry and misconduct, because that's just like basically a section of the stream at this point. I mean, every week there's a new misconduct story. Activision Blizzard has been disinvited from speaking at South by Southwest due to the litany of misconduct and allegations surrounding the company. So originally there's going to be a member of, or a the chief marketing officer of Activision Blizzard, Fernando Machado, had been invited to speak on a panel at South by Southwest. Excuse me, sorry. Ugh. My body is trying to die for some reason. But anyway, yeah, he's going to speak on a panel on March 12th about user retention in the gaming industry, which is kind of a deeply ironic subject given how many people have stopped playing Blizzard's games over the misconduct allegations. But yeah, he was disinvited from speaking at that event, which will take place very soon. Starting, has it already started? I don't know. Anyway, it's this week. But yeah, so basically, the VP of communications at South by Southwest said, given the ongoing and unfolding nature around these sexual harassment accusations being covered up at the executive levels of Activision, we decided it was best to not have high profile speakers from Activision Blizzard present at South by Southwest this year. So, again, kind of the dominoes falling around or continuing to fall as a result of what is going on at Activision Blizzard. Relatedly, unfortunately, Sony is also facing similar allegations, specifically PlayStation. So let's see, 8 more women, former and current employees at Sony PlayStation, have added their accounts of sexist treatment to a proposed class action lawsuit against the gaming giant. Yeah, so basically, again, just like this is kind of there was already a suit against PlayStation that was filed last November, and more people have joined on to onto that suit. Let's see. Sony just denied the original claims, asking a court to toss the lawsuit over the lack of specific facts. Um, the person in question fails to identify. Yeah, blah blah blah. Her attorney yesterday filed statements from the 8 women, including a current PlayStation employee. Details. The women describe a range of behaviors across multiple US based PlayStation offices, including demeaning comments, unwelcome advances, a lack of attention paid to their work or ideas, and most frequently, a sense that it was harder for women to be promoted in the company. So these are the more specific allegations that Sony basically accused the suit of not containing originally. Let's see, going into even more detail. Marie Harrington, a veteran of Sony Online Entertainment and Sony PlayStation for more than 16 years, cited a lack of women considered for senior roles during during calibration sessions. During one session, she said only 4 women were considered for promotions compared to nearly 70 men. That is a ratio that is to be, that is a terrible ratio by pretty much any measure. Um, she described hearing comments about female candidates' family lives that weren't made about male candidates, and that's just textbook workplace discrimination. Let's see. In a 2018 email to superiors regarding bullying by men at the company, Harrington linked to a New York Times article about women revolting against toxic males at Nike, asking, "Can we address this before PlayStation has its own national news article?" Which, here we go. It now has its own national news article. Let's see. Another woman cited a third-party study that found a great imbalance in terms of employee distribution in her team. So yeah, uh, you know, in a lot of ways, the it's not the exact same as what's happening at Activision Blizzard. The allegations are, I think, a lot more kind of like along the lines of company conduct as opposed to sexual misconduct. But nonetheless, like this is not how a company should run. I mean, this is, like I said earlier, that is workplace discrimination as described. Again, these are allegations. Court has not made a ruling in one way or another. but nonetheless. So let's see. I believe Sony is not equipped to appropriately handle toxic environments, wrote Kara Johnson, a former program manager, in her statement. Um, so yeah, and then Sony has not replied to a request for comment at the moment. There will be a, let's see, yesterday's filing met a deadline for replies to Sony's attempt to drop the suit. So that's kind of where things are at for now. But again, it's always worth keeping in mind that Activision Blizzard is far from the only company dealing with allegations like this right now. That there are quite a few, and so then like it's also really something that this news dropped yesterday, at the same time, more or less, as Sony was doing their State of Play, which is their big video game announcement palooza of the month. And yeah, they just showed off like a lot of different games that I don't know, all seem like it's always really weird to report on this stuff, right? Because it's like, all right, so major discrimination suit, um, and then like new video games. Like this is the duality of reporting on the video games industry in 2022. Is just that in like 2 hours yesterday summed up the whole thing. And so it's even weirder to like read about this on stream because at least in an article you can like kind of, point to the lawsuit at the end and be like, also this is going on and like it's pretty bad. Whereas like if you're talking about it on stream, it's like, okay, time to kind of hold both of these ideas in my head presently. But yeah, new games. Exo Primal looks like kind of interesting. Yeah, let's see. It's like you fight dinosaurs in mechs. I don't know. It seems like the most like the splashiest of the games they announced yesterday. Like
Hello,
the year
this is
2043.
the Android. I'd like to share today's dinosaur forecast. A dinosaur outbreak will soon occur.
I'm always worrying about dinosaur outbreaks.
The area have been evacuated, and a team of exo fighters has been dispatched.
I appreciate it because it has that feeling that like B movie feeling of Capcom games from like the 2010s, like Dead Rising, where it's just like, it's clearly like a AAA video game, but it's also patently ridiculous. I mean, it's literally raining dinosaurs. Oh wait, that is a very low resolution. Let me make it look prettier. There you go. Sorry, we gotta watch dinosaurs rain again, but in higher resolution. There. Those are very sturdy dinosaurs, by the way. I feel like if any people fell from that height, they just go splat. But yeah, so what do you do when you are faced with an invading force of incredibly sturdy dinosaurs? You get these people.
I make a sensitive situation.
You've been living planning to keep the records for 2 years.
All I wanted was to be IBS's top pilot.
IDS's latest dinosaur forecasts and exosuit technology.
I love that they have dinosaur forecasts. Like they're not even pretending that this is anything other than it raining dinosaurs. They're like, yep, a 70% chance of cloudy weather and dinosaur avalanches today. And so yeah, then you fight them with big old mechs. The mechs in some ways like remind me a little bit of kind of the design of what do you call it? BioWare game that got that died. Wow, I'm blanking on the name right now. Anyway, BioWare's game that also had mechs. But yeah, I mean, oh, and it also reminds me of Vanquish, which is a very underrated game. Oh yeah, Anthem. Sorry, that's the name of BioWare's game that got canceled, or that they shut down. But yeah, so that one was kind of like the splashiest announcement. I mean, it seems like it could be interesting, or at the very least, could be dumb fun, which I'm very into. Let's see, should have been a Dino Crisis sequel, missed opportunity. I mean, right? Especially when dinosaurs vomit from the sky. Yes. Yeah, no. I would definitely describe that as a Dino Crisis. I would say, like, without a doubt, in my mind, that counts as a Dino Crisis. Unless I get, well, even then, because, like, it depends on how you consider, like, weather, right? Because I would say it's less a Dino Crisis and more a Dino natural disaster. In any case, yes, I agree. And maybe they'll, like, reveal midway through, they'll be like, oh, by the way, this is set in the Dino Crisis continuity. They could do that. Maybe they're just like rebranding because like that series everyone forgot about. And they're like, well, it's time to, you know, give this a fresh coat of paint. But in any case, yeah, so there's that. There's also a new Valkyrie Chronicle game. That's another like very kind of like PlayStation 1 era series that I guess they're reviving. It's called the Dio Field Chronicle, which, you know, Square Enix and their names. Um, yeah, this is a Square Enix game, right? I'm now, I believe it is, but I don't remember because I wasn't paying super. Yes, it's Square Enix. But yeah, so it's very Final Fantasy Tactics-y, which I can't complain about because I love those games. I'm an enormous fan of turn-based tactics strategy RPGs. And so yeah,
It made me wonder.
here we go. That's just all CG stuff.
Turmoil. The continent was ravaged by the
Yeah. Narration, I know.
We've finally been called up. We're up against the
But yeah, it seems cool, and I mean, I'm glad to see a sudden kind of like increase in the number of these games that we're getting. Because like, you know, for a while it was kind of like market cornered by Fire Emblem and like in the more Western vein XCOM. And now we're getting this. We just got Triangle Strategy. So, you know, it seems like these sorts of games are on the rise in a way that they hadn't been for a while. And they're getting like this has a budget. So that's, again, just generally neat to see. And again, what I really like is that games like this in Triangle Strategy are doing really cool things with like the idea of a top-down view. They're giving it like visually kind of a unique look that I think really draws on just the sort of like way that perspective works. This feels like a tabletop game almost in terms of just like how it looks visually. So yeah, I mean, in general, seems like a cool game. I think that a lot of people were kind of like disappointed by the state of play yesterday because it was over pretty quick, and they didn't really like, you know, they didn't say like, oh, by the way, here's a release date for Final Fantasy 16. But I think that the stuff that they did show is still subtly pretty cool. Those games look neat. Oh wait, Diofield Chronicles is okay. Is Valkyrie Elysium? Oh no, this is the new Valkyrie profile. I got confused because this has a Chronicle in the name, and then this is anyway. It's fine. Diofield Chronicle seems like a Final Fantasy Tactics like game. There we go. Sorry, I made a mistake. Misinformation. Sorry. But anyway, yeah. So Diofield Chronicle looks really neat, and then Valkyrie Elysium is a new Valkyrie Chronicle or Valkyrie profile game. It's like an action RPG though. That's right. Okay. Yeah. So as they're saying on Kotaku, it's more action than RPG, and yeah, it kind of looks very old and kind of like, yeah, a little bit budget. But you know, it's interesting to see Sony revive a series like that, because I don't think anyone has really talked about Valkyrie Profile outside of retro circles in, God, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. But yeah, I mean, you know, it doesn't look terrible or anything. It just looks kind of like, I mean, these environments are very barren, and you know, maybe it's very early in development though, and they might like spruce it up by the time it comes out. That's always the risk of trailers, is that you never really know what kind of footage they're drawing on. I guess the game's coming out sometime this year, so it can't be that early in development. We will see. In any case, it exists. What? I'm gonna go ahead and pause that trailer. But yeah, oh yeah, and then they also announced some Returnal DLC, other stuff like that. Let's see, wait a minute. Earth Dino Force, Sharknado, Dinofoon. Dinofoon is the one I would play. Dino Field Chronicle. Yeah, see, that's the key here. Just more dinosaurs in all these games. If they just all had dinosaurs, they'd be distinctly more interesting. Maybe like in the spirit of all these recent, you know, kind of metaversey crossovers, they can just add dinosaur tornadoes or dinosaur storm clouds to every one of the major Sony games. So Returnal will get them, Uncharted will get them, next God of War will have them. Then I think we'll be like talking. And then let's see, beyond that, Forspoken got delayed. And so yeah, now it's coming out in what, October or something like that? Yeah, I'm just gonna go right to the end of the trailer. Everyone's seen enough Forspoken. Yeah, October 11th is the new date. And yeah, the game looks cool. I mean, it's got mobility that reminds me of Warframe, so I'm into it. Otherwise, new trailer for Final Fantasy Origin, which seems like it'll at least be pretty goofy, so I'm intrigued by it. Gundam game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, and then I can't believe that they haven't. Here we go. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fighting game looks cool. Yeah, so I mean, not a lot of like huge names. It's not like it was a day of big kind of Jeff Keighley announcements or whatever, but you know, intriguing nonetheless. Speaking of intriguing announcements from companies currently undergoing lawsuits and other allegations surrounding sexual discrimination and harassment, Blizzard announced a major change to Overwatch 2 today. So basically, they have decided to decouple, in their words, Overwatch 2's PvP and PvE, which gives the distinct impression that the reason why Overwatch 2 has been taking so long is because of the PvE side of things, because they're going to immediately start testing Overwatch 2's PvP with an alpha test for people who work at Blizzard and esports players and stuff like that. And then they're going to do a beta test in April. Yeah, the first PvP beta, which I believe it'll still be a closed test, so it won't be available to everybody. But yeah, they're going to be testing beginning in April 5v5 multiplayer down from 6v6. A new hero, Sojourn, who will also be the first new hero added to anything Overwatch related in like, gosh, when did here, let's see, when did they add their last hero? Let's see, Overwatch most recent hero released. Yeah, they added Echo in. Let's see, Overwatch Echo added when? Yeah, back in 2020. So they've not added a new hero to. Was it really 2020? I thought it was less recent even than that. No, yeah. Okay, so yeah, they added a hero in 2020, and so Overwatch 2's beta will add the first new hero to the game since then, in the form of Sojourn, who also, in addition to the fact that she's the first new hero in ages, she's the first Black woman in the game ever, which is something that a lot of people have been upset about for a long time, justifiably, because Overwatch is a game that prided itself for a long time on being, more diverse than a lot of video games tend to be, at least in terms of like competitive multiplayer games. And yet there is not a single Black woman in the entire cast. And sort of one of the main arguments people made about that is they're like, you literally added a hamster to the game before a Black, female presenting human being. So yeah. And then they're also adding new maps, a new mode called Push, major reworks of probably all of the heroes because to fit the 5v5 format, they pretty much have to, and a new ping system probably inspired by Apex Legends. So yeah, this is a pretty big change for Overwatch's release schedule. Me and the game had essentially gone dark for a long time, only doing like holiday events that didn't really change anything substantial or add anything major to kind of the lineup of things in the game aside from just new skins. And yeah, I think this probably also is in service of the esports scene for the game, which had been flagging for quite some time. And they're going to start the new season on Overwatch 2 on a beta version of it. So I think this is probably going to build up to that, which, is intriguing to me because when they first announced Overwatch 2, it already seemed so much like just kind of an evolution of Overwatch 1 without being like a major kind of overhaul or like it didn't feel like a totally different game. It just felt like a series of expansions almost. And then it's taken years for there to be anything. And it seems like it's had, if not a troubled development cycle, then at least a prolonged one. So now we're finally going to see something of it. Meaning, again, PvE is going to remain in development away from the public eye for the time being. But if nothing else, the sort of Overwatch series is going to be on some kind of a track. So we'll see what that results in. But for now, there's some sort of a light at the end of the tunnel. Let's see. Speaking of tunnels, this is a belabored analogy because I guess in this particular game, there are loading screens disguised by tunnels. God of War seems to be in line to get a TV series adapted by, or at least I'm not sure if they've settled on doing it for sure, but it seems like Amazon is interested in adapting it. According to Deadline, PlayStation's flagship action adventure franchise God of War is heading to television. Prime Video is in negotiations for a live action TV series based on the hugely popular ancient mythology themed game. Yeah, let's see. The series adaptation comes from The Expanse creators, Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby, and Wheel of Time executive producer. And yeah, will be, let's see, collaborate on all TV series based on PlayStation games. So, I mean, it's another kind of advance in the Hollywoodification of video game series. Yeah, to Deadline's point about that, Peacock just picked up Twisted Metal. HBO has obviously been working on Last of Us, which will premiere later this year, starring big names, Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. It's like not a B tier cast by any means. Yeah, Netflix has Resident Evil. Paramount is about to premiere Halo, actually at South by Southwest. Yeah, so I mean, like, video games are where it's at in terms of new. Oh yeah, and then like on a previous stream, I talked about BioShock getting turned into a movie. So video games are where it's at in terms of like, new franchises for TV and film. Will God of War be good? Remains to be seen. I would say that at least compared to some of these series, God of War has a better chance at it, just because like, the most recent God of War game is very cinematic already. And like has, I think, like a story that definitely, it works because it's interactive, like any video game. But I could see the basic storyline of like everything that happens in the most recent God of War and kind of Kratos' relationship with his son being a pretty good TV show. I mean, yeah, a good video game equals a bad movie. Mortal Kombat is the only odd one out. Yeah, which is weird because you would think Mortal Kombat, just on paper, the way that like, what it's about would make for a terrible TV or movie series. And yet, I would say that almost every Mortal Kombat movie has been at least pretty fun. I mean, I think that's kind of the thing, right? There's kind of this like, actually, okay, I'm developing a theory of how this works right now. This is my unilateral, unanimous, applies to every single video game, TV, and movie theory. It's infallible. I just came up with it. So basically, you can have a good TV or movie show based on a video game if either A, it is based on like one of the greatest stories a video game has ever told, or B, if it's based on one of the dumbest stories a game has ever told. There's no middle ground. If you are in any way in the middle ground, it won't work as a TV show or movie. But if it's A, a very good story, or B, a hilariously bad story, then it's great. Because Mortal Kombat's story is not good. The Mortal Kombat series is just like bananas and like never makes any sense. And that's just an ideal movie if people know what they're doing with it, which is just make it big, dumb fun. And then, like, I mean, a lot of these things, like I think Last of Us has a good chance at being good. I think God of War has a decent chance at being good. But then like Uncharted, for example, I mean, people say Uncharted is a good video game story. I don't agree with them. I think it's like a pretty middling story, just told with, a fun script. Like it didn't really work. It's not that good of a movie. So I'm right. This is correct. Again, across the board, unilateral, cannot be debated. The end. Let's see, the first MK movie and even bits of the second MK movie still slap. Yeah. Yeah, no. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with the very first Mortal Kombat movie to the point that I was able to convince myself, and again, I was a kid, so you know how it goes, that Annihilation was also good. I think in hindsight, if I watched that movie, I'd be like, what? What am I watching? This is terrible. But at the time, I mean, I was a child. I like dressed as Scorpion for Halloween one year, so that should tell you everything you need to know. Anyway, let's see. In other news from this week, we're running a little late, so I'm probably gonna. Yeah, let's see. Let's do one last real story, then jump into silly stuff. So yeah, here is just one of those headlines that makes you immediately want to click. He spent $57,000 in COVID relief on a Pokemon card. Now the United States owns it. Yeah, and I mean the story is pretty much as it's described. Let's see, the Mint Charizard trading card will be auctioned off with other fraudulently obtained luxury items seized by U.S. Marshals. Its former owner was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Never has somebody encountered such severe consequences for getting a holographic Charizard. If only I had known when I was opening packs of these things as a kid that people would be spending, tens of thousands of dollars and going to jail over them. I would have made very different choices. Let's see. But yeah, the man, Vineth. Oh my God, I'm never going to try to pronounce that name. Look at this. Look at this. This is, I mean, not even going to give it a try. But yeah, was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison on Friday, according to prosecutors who said that he pleaded guilty last October to defrauding a loan program operated by the Small Business Administration. In January 2021, Mr. Nope spent $57,789 of loan proceeds from the program on the card, a first edition Charizard released in 1999. I used to have one of those that features a dragon-like creature from the Pokemon franchise, court documents show. 5 months earlier, he had received an $85,000 loan from the program for his small entertainment services business, which prosecutors said that he had claimed had 10 employees and gross revenues of $235,000 during the 12 months before the coronavirus pandemic. However, prosecutors said there was no such business. I mean, this is like one of the more elaborate things, because like we're in this time period, right, where like Pokemon cards are worth more than they ever were. I mean, as a like speculative investment market, more likely than anything else. But nonetheless, people can get big money for them. And so, like, I'm not going to say this is the most high stakes thing somebody has ever done to get a Pokemon card. And that also probably includes like dares people, like kids took on playgrounds in 1999. I'm sure somebody like jumped 3 stories or something terrible. But in any case, this definitely ranks up there, right? Like somebody was like, I want a Charizard real bad. And in service of this, I'm going to fake having a 10-person company that pulls in $235,000 per year. And I'm going to I'm going to slow play this over the course of months. Like, I guess justice was served here, but on some level, you gotta applaud the ingenuity of it. Or if not applaud it, then at least be like, I'm vaguely impressed by this. But yeah, anyway, this person's going to prison for 3 years. So do not take my being vaguely impressed as any sort of endorsement, because it's not. No one should ever, 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 ever try to do this. If you take away one thing from today's stream, aside from, diversify your news sources, pay attention to what's happening in the world, then the other lesson of today's stream is don't defraud the federal government. Don't do that. Never do that. You will get in big trouble. And then bad things will happen to your bank account and life. Moving on from there. So this is something I just wanted to like quickly click over to. We can't watch the whole thing, but we can watch maybe no, that'd be big time spoilers. Never mind. But the short version of this is that somebody managed to beat Elden Ring, the notoriously difficult game everyone's really into right now, in less than an hour, which is wild. And yeah, so as I understand it, what he basically did is he managed to use one trick that developers hard coded into the game so they could get past a lot of content very quickly. And then he used some other he tricked other spawn points in the game into loading him into final areas super prematurely after he died. And in doing that, was then able to finish the game really quickly. He also used a weapon that like its stats leveling up are decoupled from your stats. And so you can just like pay for upgrades to the weapon really quickly and max it out. So then your damage is like basically in-game caliber super duper early. But yeah, it's one of these things where like anybody who's able to figure this out this quickly after a game's release is just like, like a god tier galaxy brain. Like, where do you even begin? I could never. I mean, I just spend all my time in this game, like, running around farming things. And then like occasionally I like when I really get stuck, I'm like, okay, somebody on the internet, please tell me what to do. I can't figure this out. I'm not smart enough nor determined enough. This person though, was. So yeah, good job, Lil Aggie, because it's one heck of an accomplishment. And because of the way he figured out how to do it, he thinks people are going to be like doing sub 50-minute times before too long, which again, it's wild. Absolutely wild. One moment. Because I'm soloing the show today, I'm so dehydrated. Usually when like Shannon or somebody is here, by the way, she's not here today because she's prepping to go to South by Southwest, and travel is exhausting. So no show for her. But yeah, I get mad dehydrated when trying to do this alone. how does anybody talk this much? How does anyone stream solo? I know I ask this question like every week, but good lord, it takes so much work. So yeah, moving on to other Elden Ring related stuff that is impressive in a totally different way. The same guy who beat Elden Ring with the Ring Fit controller last week has now beaten it with a banana controller. So here we go. It is a controller made of bananas wired together with a pretty simple interface. Yeah, you can buy these interfaces in stores. They're called Arduinos. But nonetheless, he managed to wire up all the traditional inputs of a controller to a series of bananas, and then beat Godric, which is the kind of second major boss, or first, depending on what you consider Margit, in the game.
We're done. We're done. We're done.
Yep. There we go.
Sorry, I had to focus there, but we just beat freaking Godric with a stupid banana controller, y'all.
Yep. He did it with a banana controller. For the record, this is... It's not painful for me to watch, but I mean, it does make me reevaluate. Again, much like the Pokemon card thing, it makes me reevaluate my own life choices on the basis that I still haven't beaten Godric, and I put 30 hours into this stupid game. So, you know, to watch someone do it with a banana controller that they hastily wired together, yeah, it's like, you know, every accomplishment that you can feel really good about can be immediately undone by something like this. Yeah, can't wait to see Elden Ring at GDQ. Yeah, me too. Man, that's going to be so bonkers. Like, I love GDQ. GDQ, like anything they do. I also just like randomly watch their Twitch channel because they have like a lot of, you know, they'll just have speedrunners come on even outside of marathons just to like do stuff. I love speedruns because they're so soothing to watch for some reason. I cannot wait to see Elden Ring at GDQ. Like the stuff people are going to come up with, the tricks they're going to use is going to be mind blowing. I feel like it's going to be, I think it will be a GDQ, or at least like speedrunning mainstay for a while. Or at least I hope so, because I can't wait to see what people are going to do with it. Oh yeah, so here's a fun one. Or at least I mean, I don't know if I'd call it, it's a weird one. Anyway, Snoop Dogg joined FaZe Clan. Yes, that Snoop Dogg. Here represented by a cartoon dog. But it is the one that you know.
Am I still streaming?
Let's go. You're breaking up. I'm breaking up heads right now, baby. That's all the breaking up doing. You did.
Hey, Snoop. I am a part of the FaZe Clan.
Phase up with us.
It's going down. Phase the fuck up.
Yeah, so joining in the long history of famous people joining esports organizations, because there are a lot of them at this point. They invest, you know. Yeah, Snoop is now part of FaZe Clan, itself a weird designation because FaZe Clan, being part of FaZe Clan can mean any number of things. We actually published a really good article on this a while ago about like the weird fungibility of like, what does it mean to be part of FaZe Clan? And like FaZe Clan can just kind of like claim plausible deniability on anyone at any moment. But anyway, to the extent that one can be part of FaZe Clan, Snoop Dogg now is. And I love this for him on the basis that his streams are just magnificent to me. Because like, so last year there's this whole thing going on where he like tried to stream, and for almost a week, or I think maybe more than a week, he didn't realize that he was muted on voice chat. He'd go live for hours per day, and like he had his chat set to emote only, and his viewers just tried desperately to communicate with him that he was inaudible. They would like spam all these emotes of like X's next to like little speakers and things like that, and he just didn't get it. And so then flash forward, he finally like had a friend fix his setup for him so that he could be heard again. And then nothing changed. And nothing changed because all Snoop Dogg does on his streams is he sits there in perfect silence and plays Madden. And that's great. I love that. That level of just like, I'm going to put no effort into this because I'm Snoop Dogg is like, I mean, how can you not like that? Or at least how can you not appreciate that? And I mean, like, it also goes along with kind of the broader perception of Snoop Dogg as a pop cultural entity at this point. I think I saw somebody sum it up the best by saying basically that Snoop Dogg is like a character in a video game who already completed the main quest and is now going back to just do all the side quests. And it like showed pictures of him doing everything from like, like all these weird collaborations he's decided to do in the music world to like cooking with Martha Stewart to like, everything else. He's basically like a Yakuza character from the Yakuza games, where he's just like running around being like, yeah, what random activity that has nothing to do with my actual life am I going to do today? And that includes now joining FaZe Clan. So there you go. That's the Snoop Dogg update of the week. I hope there will be more in the future. Let's see. This I just found really funny because like Mario, what is Mario's real last name? I guess we'll never know. Nintendo also will never know, because for years for decades they've been going back and forth on whether or not his last name is Mario. So beginning in 1981, introduced, no last name. 83, Mario Brothers is released, suggesting Mario's full name is Mario, listed as such in licensed material. 1989, an interview with Nintendo of America states Mario's name is not Mario. 93, Mario's name is stated to be Mario in the Super Mario Brothers movie. 2012, Satoru Iwata states Mario's name is not Mario. 2015, Miyamoto says it is. Current day, Mario's name is still Mario, though this can change at any moment. So I hope that clears it up for you. Let's see. Speaking of beloved platforming heroes, at least as beloved as Mario, in my opinion, and definitely in my headcanon. Guess who's coming back, folks? That's right. It's Glover. Now, if you haven't heard of Glover, shame on you. Glover is a 90s platforming hero from the same era as Mario 64, following on at the then glut of 3D platformers, kind of born of, Super Mario 64 success. He is a walking, talking glove, thus the name Glover. And he's just one of those pieces of 90s ephemera that, I remember being like present in my life when I was a little kid. I'd see ads for this in video game magazines. And I was just utterly like, I didn't think much about it when I was a kid, because when you're a kid, everything just kind of makes intrinsic sense to you. It's like, yeah, sure, that's happening. Makes sense to me. The world is vast and mysterious. I don't understand anything, so I don't really have a point of reference to compare this to, and therefore I'm willing to accept it all. But in hindsight, it's just like somebody somewhere at a major company at the time said to themselves, you know what people would want? They would want a video game hero who is an anthropomorphic glove. That's the thing. And so they made this game kind of in the vein of like rare platformers, so like Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong, featuring a glove. And oh yeah, by the way, in addition to being a glove, his main thing was rolling on a ball, like, a circus performer. Anyway, against all odds, in the year 2022, Glover is coming back, at least in the form of not a remake, just a remaster of the original game. But yeah, I mean, I didn't think anyone other than me even like regularly thought about Glover anymore. So it is truly wild to see this hero of video game history make a return. Also, I've got to point to the Steam description of the game, because it's really something. You control a charismatic glove that walks on two fingers, slaps harder than Steve Austin, dribbles faster than Scottie Pippen, and plays with a bouncy rubber ball. So they're really leaning into the 90s stuff, because I don't think anybody talks about Steve Austin or Scottie Pippen anymore. But yeah, so Glover's back. If you missed the chance last time to embrace this whimsical little hand man, now you have a chance to explore his world. Today's final and frankly most important story is one that I managed to manufacture entirely on my own. Last week we talked a lot about the Steam Deck, and so in service of fully understanding kind of the potential of the Steam Deck as a gaming machine and as a more versatile piece of technology, I decided to have none other than Washington Post / Launcher's own cat correspondent, Biscuit, give it a try. Oh yeah, sorry everyone, I don't think she's in the background today. Is she? Let me check. No, she's decided to sleep on the couch. That's her new spot for now. But anyway, I let Biscuit put the Steam Deck through its paces, and she didn't really come away from it with a high opinion. She, didn't really look at it very much. Kind of looked away from it a lot. But it is warm, so great for napping on, which is very important. I hadn't considered that even. Biscuit is an innovator. This is why I assign all of these stories to her that I never have time to do. But yeah, so it's good for napping on. And now it's time for a world exclusive surrounding this. I've not posted this anywhere else. I also asked her for a video review of it, and here's how that turned out. Biscuit, what do you think of the Steam Deck? Do you like it? Do you think it's cool? No? Yes? So yeah, to sum up, when asked about the Steam Deck, Biscuit replied, insofar as she's capable of replying, "Get that camera out of my face." So anyway, that's Biscuit's take on the Steam Deck. I will, of course, have her back in the future for as many hardware and video game reviews as I can subject her to. In the meantime, this has been Washington Post Story Mode. We do this every Friday, or every Thursday at 4 p.m. ET. We'll be back next week doing the same thing. And we also do a video game stream every week on Friday at 4 p.m. I think this week we're going to do that with Elden Ring again. It's not fully solidified yet, but we might have a very special guest for that. We might not. We'll see. In the meantime, thank you for everybody who tuned in, everyone who stuck around, and I will be back next week. Toodles.